2017. I'd like to call the Fitchburg City Council to order for a special meeting this evening. Madam Clerk, could you please conduct the roll?
President Kushmerek.
Present.
Councilor Bean.
Here.
Councilor Boishman.
Present.
Councilor Beazall.
Present.
Councilor Clark.
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale.
Here.
Councilor Donnelly.
Here.
Councilor Green. Here. Councilor Joseph.
Here.
Councilor Caddy.
Here.
Councilor Tran.
Here. Councilor Bean, would you please lead us in the salute? Happy to. Warrant for a special meeting of the City Council. Special meeting of the Fitchburg City Council will be held on Tuesday, October 17th, 2017, at 6 p.m. Memorial Middle School, 615 Rollstone Street, Fitchburg, Mass. The agenda will consist of the following this evening. Just one item: hearing, classification, and taxation of property according to use, in accordance with provisions of Chapter 797 of the Acts of 1979, as amended by Chapter 79 of the Acts of 1983. Mr. Wilson and Mr. Paquette, would you like to join us? Excellent. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
I'd like to start with a few opening comments. Good evening, councilors. The City of Fitchburg Board of Assessors recently completed an analysis of properties that sold in the city during calendar 2016 to determine the fair market value of all property as of January 1st, 2017. We're required by the Department of Revenue to assess all property at its full and fair cash value. As a result of this sales study, the total valuation of the city in taxable property increased by $166 million, which represents an overall increase of 7.57% in property value. Single-family homes values increased by 8.89%, while commercial and industrial went up by 12.53 and 8.32 respectively. This represents a balanced increase in the values among the major property classes in the city. When it comes to growth, which is essentially new property that's being taxed for the first time, the majority of new growth is still growth related to our personal property class. While each class of property had new growth in line with our 3-year average, a predominance of personal property growth is not ideal because that's the one class of property that depreciates rapidly. There are, however, a number of projects slated to begin that should result in larger growth numbers in the following years. Overall, the local real estate market remains strong and values in Fitchburg should continue to increase. However, uncertainty in the larger U.S. economy and global economy and upward pressure on interest rates could have a tendency to stall out our local real estate market. The book that I prepared and emailed you and sent you and gave you a physical copy of is a combination of classification and taxation hearing booklet and the Assessor's Department's annual report to the City Council. This is a good reference to keep handy and can be referenced throughout the year, especially during the budget process. In closing, I'd like to answer any specific questions you may have regarding the information that was provided in the book or in the tax rate setting process in general. Thank you.
Councilor Green.
My only question is, when you reference balanced increase this year, has that increase, has it been steady over the past couple of years, or is this a spike?
Last year was similar growth, increase in values to this year, but in some of the prior years, we'd have one class going up faster than the other classes. So the reason I mention that is if you had a residential properties increasing at 10% and you had no commercial industrial increase in value, then there'd be a built-in shift over to the residences. In this particular case, they all went up around 9 or 10%. So it's balanced and everyone's sharing any increase at the single rate.
All right, do you still see us increasing this year, especially commercial growth?
Are you talking this coming year or what's represented in the book?
What's represented in the book?
Yeah, so we had, we had fairly balanced growth if you look at the 3-year average. So we've had commercial, industrial,
And that's on what page, Mr. Wilson?
if you look at the graph on page 27, it shows you the dollar amounts from each of the classes of property. So residentially, $157,000, commercial, $56,000, industrial, $47,000, and then personal property, which is always the highest class, around $400,000.
Thank you.
Questions from counselors? Counselor Boishman.
Ken, I already asked you this one time before at the meeting we had, you and I forget, AJ was with us. Every year, and I know what you're gonna say to me, but every year, we raise the property to 2.5%, because we're guaranteed under the law to go 2.5%. That's what we say. And I asked you this question, and I still have a hard time. We're playing speculation, like you mentioned, global. If something happens in the world today, housing stock goes down. And then we come near to the levee, and we're near to, like we were a couple of years ago in Angelo, and Council Tran, and Council Dina said, we're very, very close. We gotta watch what we're doing, or we're gonna start laying up. I know you work for the mayor. I understand you work for the mayor. But why can't you and Mr. Brooks have a meeting with us before we start going over this budget and try to keep it at going up 1.5% per year, and forget about saying, well, in 5 years, we can take that 1% that we haven't used for the last 5 years and tax the people 10. We just say, we're not gonna use it, but still have a kitty. I still like the idea of having a kitty, like they use the tax return. At the end of the year, we get money back. I like the kitty. Why can't we do that? I still have a hard time I keep on telling you, and I keep on mentioning, I have a hard time to understand that. Why we have to go and say we're going up 2.5% every year, no matter what, we're going up 2.5%. So, because we're guaranteed under the law. And I have a hard time with that, because I have to budget my book to what I make. And if I don't get any overtime, I can't count that in. So, you know, I just don't understand why we can't just say, we're gonna just raise it at 1.5% per year and stay that way instead of going 2.5%. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Counselor, the budget is
I know.
ultimately, the budget proposal that gets put forth to
understand that.
us is the mayor's proposal. So it would be his prerogative as to whether or not he plans to put a budget forward that represents a 1.5% increase versus a 2.5% increase. So ultimately, you know, that's the mayor's budget that's put in front of us. You know, I'm sure moving forward, I'd be happy to invite the city assessor to join us, you know, as part of the opening round of the budget hearing to talk about what the overall levy would look like, you know, at whatever percent councilors are most interested. I'll say this, that, you know, all department heads are available for us to talk to them at any point to figure out what those numbers are. So if you're looking for particular numbers, I'd encourage you, you know, prior to the budget, you know, come springtime to try to make an appointment and sit down, and if you're curious about particular numbers. But, you know, I just wanted to clarify that this is ultimately the mayor's process, and I don't want to put our department heads in a situation of having to answer on behalf of our city process.
All right then. Ken, another question for you. The university just bought a piece of property on North Street, and I was just talking to you, at a $7.5 million, a loss to the taxpayers. So that equals approximately 44 homes taken off of the tax roll.
So doing a quick calculation, the amount of taxes that will be given up because of that process would equal the amount of taxes we would collect from 41 homes approximately. And I think I gave you this answer before, but I'll give it for the benefit of everyone who's here. Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 2, all property owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is exempt from taxes. Now, if you can find wiggle room in that, I'd be happy to try to tax them. But there is no room to tax those. You can't tax state-owned property. So when it becomes exempt, when it becomes owned by the Commonwealth, I can't tax it. So,
Okay, but I understand that. The mayor's a very good speaker, very excellent good speaker, and I wish I could speak like him. Why aren't we going after pilot program and saying to the university, well, if our students who live in Fitchburg go to the grammar school, to the high school, and have 10 to 12 years in school, give us a discount on the rate for the tuition for their school, for your school. I mean, they're $7.5 million in taxes, and they can't give us a pilot program? $7.5 million? That's what they get. Am I right, sir?
$7.5 million in value.
Value. So what's that coming to, about 4.5 million?
No.
What? I thought it was $5,163,000.
$161,000 in taxes.
That's it? And 7.5 million?
Yeah.
All right, never mind then. Redraw the question.
Counselor Joseph.
Ken, how does our property value increase compare to any of the neighboring cities around us with property value increases?
You know, I don't actually study what happens in other towns, but one thing I do is on page, I think it's 35. That graph shows you what the average tax bill is for any particular number of the surrounding communities. So it's a simple calculation. It's the total value of the single-family homes divided by the number of single-family homes for each and every one of those towns listed in the legend. So you can see that Fitchburg has the lowest average single-family tax bill compared to any of our surrounding communities. So assuming that all tax rates are going up at the same rate, you can see the angle on those graphs, and you can approximate that they're all, you know, the property values are increasing in these other communities in a similar way to how they are in Fitchburg.
Okay, so whatever we're doing has worked for us, whatever they're doing has worked for them.
Right, it's more like somebody wants to buy a house somewhere, and they limit it to what towns they're interested in. And so when the overall economy is going up in central Mass, say, I would assume that there's gonna be equal increases in the surrounding communities. Some go up first before the others, but they all tend to rise at the same rate, within reason.
And we've risen slower than others.
Well, if you look at that, the last two numbers on that graph, 2016, 2017, you can see, assuming that the rates went up at the same rate, you know, the slope of all those lines is fairly similar.
Right.
So that would tell me that if the rates are going up at the same rate, then the assessment is going up at the same rate.
Okay.
But again, I haven't physically studied Leominster, Ashby. I'm using raw data to come up with my conclusion.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Beazall.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate Council Boschman bringing up the budget because it does have a direct effect on what's happening tonight. I had a couple residents ask me about the taxes tonight, and I said, tonight we're just deciding on where the shift is. We're not really deciding the taxes. The taxes were already decided at the budget. I know that there's a sense of optimism where it comes to last year, the difference between the levy ceiling and the tax ceiling, levy ceiling and the tax levy was $5,387,000 some change. This year, it's $7,659,000. But if you actually look back in 2010, we lost 8.61% of value, or $5,800,000. So although I want to look like it's optimistic, like I was talking to Ken before, and I don't want to seem pessimistic about this. I still think in the future, we need to look at this and say, where are we going with our budgeting process and how we're budgeting? Because it does have a direct effect on tonight. In looking at this, I'm saying we have seen a 7.6% change this year, but I don't know if that's going to continue. I mean, nobody knows that. If we knew that, would all be pretty wealthy by now. But I'm just saying that I think when it comes to the budget time, we always need to side on the precautionary side, because we don't know what the future is going to hold when it comes to this. Thank you.
Counselor Di Natale.
So every year when we have this discussion, as Council Beazall pointed out, this is the most complicated and confusing thing to explain to voters and taxpayers. You need to give them a 6-month course in this. It's that complicated to explain. This whole process starts on July 1st. When the mayor submits his budget or her budget, taxes are baked in right there. If you look at the data that the assessor provided us, and I want the residents to hear this, and I would love if the Sentinel would report this accurately, because they don't. Tonight, whatever we do, they're going to have a headline saying, "We raised taxes." That's not what happened here. We had a 116 shift, meaning we've shifted 16% from the resident to the commercial industrial sector last year. If nothing changes tonight and we stay at 116, the average single-family tax bill is going up by $171 for the year, which is $42.71 a quarter. That was the case on July 1st, because the mayor submitted a budget with a 2.5% tax levy increase, and to some who have asked whether we should look at that more strongly or not, or get serious about raising it 2.5, I am here to tell you right now, in full honesty, whether it makes me popular or not, this mayor, the next mayor, the previous mayor, they have no choice but to do that. It is their sole source of added revenue, besides new growth. And why do I say that? Because of our infamous unfunded liabilities, which take up all, I repeat, all of the property tax levy increase. That's why the mayors have to do this. Now, you can make an argument there are some other cities and towns in better financial shape than us that don't have to go the 2.5, but we have to. Because how else are we going to pay for these debts? So that's what I tried to make clear at the council meeting during the budget sessions to the public. It's not pretty, I don't like saying it, but it's the reality, and I want to be honest with them. Taxes are going to go up every year for at least 20 more years, because we have saddled ourselves with a debt that is unsustainable. That's number one. So if we did nothing tonight as a council, resident tax bills go up on average $174 a quarter, for the year, which is $42.71 a quarter. What we do tonight is we say, do we want to stay at 116? Do we want to go back higher up, 118, 120, which shifts less of the tax increase on the residents and more onto the businesses? Or do we want to go forward towards the single rate, which would shift a little more taxes on top of the residents and less on the businesses? That's the question we have here tonight. There has been statements made in the past that if we go to a single rate, nothing's going to change. I am here to tell people that I, as a big single rate advocate, have never said such a thing. You have to have a single rate and sustain it. But you, more importantly, have to have the mayor and his team have an inventory of developable, available properties this city owns. Now, I've been a councilor for 10 years. I have waited long enough. I know that, according to the mayor, this is in the works right now, but I put a petition in a few weeks ago, because the more we move to a single rate as a city council, that's not going to solve our economic issues. It helps, but it doesn't get us over the goal line. We need the mayor's office through his team to go over land we can market for use. So, for example, what am I talking about? The soccer complex. The soccer complex is what we need in this city. It's a piece of undeveloped land that was valued at $500,000 that once it's done is going to be worth in excess of $8 million. That's a $7.5 million increase to the tax base on the commercial industrial side, which takes away from the residential side. That's what we want more of. The base right now is 77% homes. That, to the voters out there, to the taxpayers out there, to the residents, that's why your bills go up every year, because you're paying over 3/4 of the economic pie. We're trying as a city to get that 3/4 down so we can have more taxes be paid by the businesses. And how do you do that? You got to bring more businesses in. You got to create an environment for investment. And I haven't seen that take place in the context of undeveloped land. I know there's been a lot of economic activity in the city, and the soccer field is a prime example. We need more of those soccer field projects. Not soccer fields exactly, but I'm talking that kind of an investment. That's where the real growth comes. That's where you'll see an impact on your bill. So the single tax rate migration is one component, one, not the only one. I get it. Unitil is killing us. No access to the highway kills us. But we as a city council have a direct control over the tax rate. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. You can't just move to a single tax rate and not go forward on the development part of it. You need it done in congruence. It has to be done together. And for the last 5 or 6 years, it hasn't been done together. We've done our part as a council in moving to a single rate, but the prior administration, and hopefully the jury's out on this one, I know the prior one didn't do this, hopefully this one will, we need some movement on where it really counts, and that's the land we have that we can market for mass development. Those go hand in hand. We are the only city in Worcester County, besides Clinton, with a dual tax rate. Everybody else has a single. And every community that has a single rate, their rates are lower. So that is what we've been trying to do. So at the very worst, I will say it right here, and I'm not afraid to say it, because it's just the facts. If we stay at 116, the average resident single-family home bill goes up $42.71 or $14.24 a quarter, a month. That is if we do nothing. If we go to a 114, it'll be $48.26 a quarter, $16.09 a month. An increase over 116 of $1.48. If we go to a 112, it's $53.81 a quarter, $17.94 per month. So the headlines and the takeaway of whatever we decide to do tonight, let's say we go to a 114. The headline should not say we raised your taxes by $193.03. Shouldn't say that. What it should say is the taxes got shifted from businesses to residents by $5.47. So if we go to a 114, the average resident tax bill will be impacted by $5.41 for the year. $1.50 a quarter, which are 3 newspapers, depending on who you buy from. And if it goes to 112, it's a difference of $9.10, which is $2 and change a quarter. So that should be the headline takeaway, that what we do tonight only changes things a couple of dollars every quarter. That's all we're doing. So please, I beg the people out there, please contact one of us if you want a full explanation. Do not buy any of the usual spin that comes out of these meetings that we jacked your taxes up, that we don't care about you. What we as a council have been trying to do for 20 years, because our forefathers 50 years ago once again punted the ball, all right, is we created a dual tax system because it lowers the rate on the resident. And what has that done? It's resulted in the resident having 80% of the economic pie. It's driven businesses out of here. Doesn't help the resident. What we're trying to do is create an environment for investment, because the more that come in, the less you got to pay. It's a long, painful process, but it's one thing we're trying to do: correct the ills of the past. All right? Because to me, the dual tax rate structure was a noble effort, but it was a short-sighted effort. And we need to get off of it. But the mayor's office is the main key to these movements. We've got to see some development in unused land. This is not going to cure everything, and that's been made clear for at least the last decade. So I want the public to understand that. I do my best to explain it as best I can, because if people hear the word increase, whether it's 4 cents or $4, they go nuts. There's a method to this, and this is an average. Some people's bills may be higher, some may be less, or some may even see a reduction. It depends. It's not a broad brush issue. So I'm sorry for the lengthy commentary. I do it every year because it's my opportunity to try to explain to as many people out there that listen as possible what this means, as hard as it is to explain. And again, headline, we did not raise taxes $215. All right? If anything, we touched it by $3 or $4. That's it. Thank you.
Counselor Caddy.
I was surprised to hear the figures on industrial and commercial properties increase the way they did. Can you speculate why that may have, what happened? I mean, we're competing against all the area towns around us and cities, but I'm surprised by those increases. What's your take on it?
Some of it is, when the economy's better, all the boats rise together. So some of it's that, some of it's us, taking a closer look at the commercial industrial properties. We did spend the year before last or last year relisting all the commercial industrial property. That helped. You do have, a couple of new stores. You have the new gas station out on Princeton Road. You have the new dollar store on Water Street, another new strip mall going in there. It's primarily that the overall economy is rising all the boats at the same time. But there are small pockets of growth that account for it. Now, what's going to happen going forward is even a little bit better, and that's that, a lot of these solar projects that you have voted on haven't, even though they've come on board, they weren't on board by January 1st. So for personal property, January 1st is the date of assessment. So next year, you'll see some of those extra growth coming from the personal property sector for all of those solar projects that are coming on. We have a couple of older mill buildings that have been reutilized, so we picked up some value there. So it's a combination of a lot of little things, really.
Thanks.
Counselor Joseph.
What would you say is our biggest industrial growth segment this year?
Yeah, by far, it's always personal property.
No, as far as as far as industry, what industry grew Fitchburg this year? What moved into Fitchburg the most this year?
I'd say we've reutilized some of the older mill buildings into the medical marijuana projects.
Okay,
So those buildings have been redone, picked up some value there. I guess that would be the biggest.
okay.
Yep.
So we still do have a great segment of growth in the medical marijuana section. What are there, in order to grow marijuana, you must have to use a lot of resources like power and water and stuff like that.
Yeah, these buildings end up usually, they move in, they segment the building into a bunch of smaller rooms. They have cleaned rooms. They update the power on them, the incoming power. Usually they upgrade that, so you pick up value on the building that way.
Okay.
Counselor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the people's property taxes have already been increased since July 1st. And what we're doing tonight is basically deciding whether they are going to pay less or more based on that increase. And I think that's an easier way for them to understand. When we move towards a single tax rate, which I've been advocating since I've been on the council, and and Jody Joseph can attest to that, we started with 137. Now, we drastically have moved towards that single tax rate at 116, with the hope that we would attract new businesses to the city, thus creating jobs. In the last year or so, do you have any data that would show us that these are the new businesses that we have brought into the city, based on what we've done with the tax rate, versus businesses that we have lost leaving the city.
Right, it's very difficult to tie, a small move in the tax rate within 1 year is probably not gonna do much for the value of the businesses and commercial, industrial, and personal property.
So maybe we can expand that time frame since
Right, so,
we've moved from 137
There is a way to look
116.
at it, and let me just find the page, If you turn to page 11. So this is the total value of the community from fiscal 2011 to fiscal 2018, starting at the bottom, moving up.
And that's on page 11, Ken?
Yes.
I'm actually using your electronic copy, so it's not corresponding to the book.
It should be an identical copy online, unless you're looking at last year's book.
So it's page 21 on the electronic copy. So what are we looking at?
You're looking on the
Yeah,
left page there. So there you have fiscal 2011 going forward to fiscal 2018. And what you can see there, it's a little tricky to see it, but if you look at the residential class on the bottom in 2011 represented 80% of the share of the levy, of the total value. And as you move up, you can see that it went down to 79, down to 78, 78, 77. So there is a small increase in the residential portion of the pie going forward in time. Now, is that a result of the shifting of reducing the rate? It's very hard to tie those two together. But you can see that over those 8 years, the residential pie is getting smaller and the commercial, industrial, personal property is getting larger. Although a small amount. I would piggyback on what Councilor Di Natale said, in that what we really want is big swings. We really want large increases in the commercial, industrial tax base so that the effect will be immediate and large. This is a small effect that shows that the residential class is getting smaller, therefore paying less of the tax burden, and the commercial, industrial, personal property is getting bigger, paying a little more. I'm not saying it's tied 1-to-1 with the tax rate with the shift going down. But this is showing that overall values are increasing at different rates.
Right, so the data we're looking at is really based on the valuation of the property itself, but we have no determination of whether the new valuation is based on a new business coming to the city or not.
Well, as I said, there's, if you're talking primarily industrial, there's a couple of industrial buildings that have been repurposed, and there's a value increase there.
And further, we have no determination on whether the number of jobs have been created with the commercial growth that we're seeing.
Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, that would, I don't look at
Understood. I know
jobs, really.
it's a difficult thing, it's a difficult data that you need to maintain, but it's something that we should, as a city, have in our data to show that we're making progress. Because Fitchburg, as it stands right now, unemployment rate is about 5.8, 5.9, the highest in the district. It hasn't changed. So we need to do something, and I think I'm gonna piggyback on what Councilor Di Natale said. We can do this, and this is just a piece of the pie. Other components need to be addressed in order for us to make inroads and progress on what we want to do with the city in terms of commercial growth, attracting businesses, creating jobs, and so forth.
Well, I would say that there probably are folks who work for the city who have better data on how many jobs were created. But if you have a vacant mill building, and now you have a mill building that has people working in it, some jobs have been created, anecdotally. Anyways,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Counselor Di Natale.
A way to quantify this, you can't point to the tax rate to be the only issue, but we have gone from 80% to 77. And we have always maintained those who advocate for these shifts. It's long-term, it's slow, it's painful, and it's not the cure-all. We always talk about fostering an environment for economic growth. The tax rate structure is a part of that fostering of that environment. We have a lot of small businesses in this city. A lot of small businesses, mom and pop businesses. We're trying to not only create growth, we're trying to sustain who we've already got here. Because in prior fiscal years, we have seen hundreds and hundreds of dollars in tax increases, not on the resident, but on the small business owner. And when they are getting creamed by Unitil, it's a double whammy against them. So, unfortunately, to correct what I consider to be an ill of our past, there is short-term pain for long-term gain. And the base has gone down on the resident side by 3% within a decade, and hopefully in another decade it'll go down another 3 to 5%. Hopefully if we get some bigger movements on that end. But I cannot stress enough, you need the growth, you need the development. This is not going to do everything. This is going to do a little bit. It's a marketing technique, and it also serves as a signal. But his office needs to give us or work on this inventory of available land, and maybe not right now, but I know the city long before this, we're all housing focused here. I'm done with housing. Stop focusing on housing. Focus on businesses for the life of me, please. And market for business growth. We already killed ourselves with the Route 2 area up by Rollstone with the developments out there. We took all that land and its houses now. We don't need any more of it. We need business growth now, not houses. And the last point I'll make is when we talk about quantifying these changes, let me ask one simple question to close here. Is a single tax rate, can there be any harm for business growth prospects by having a single rate? Or can it only improve the climate? Is there a downside to having a single tax rate in the context of business growth?
No, in fact, that question's been asked before many times, and my answer is always, reducing the commercial, industrial, personal property tax rate cannot hurt the businesses
So there's no downside, it's only upside.
on commercial, industrial, personal
Exactly.
property. That's correct.
And if that upside is realized, who benefits? The residents.
Correct.
Because then they'll be asked to pay even less of the economic pie. That's the goal. We want to lower resident taxes by creating environments so we can get people from the other side of the ledger to come here so they don't have to pick up 77% of the tab every year. That's the end game here, folks. We're trying to lower resident taxes. So that's been the onus on us for at least 10 years, and I hope it continues. Thank you.
Counselor Green.
My only question, when you reference on page 48 that almost 27.5% of the total value of real taxable and exempt property in Fitchburg is tax exempt. I understand what that means, but is there a magic number? Like, would you caution, as a business owner, I would caution to say, ooh, that seems a little high. Can we cap that, or is that over where we should be? Should we be looking, again, with smart growth and who we want, buying up or have an interest in our property is probably not going to be commercial tax base that ends up being tax exempt, correct?
Correct. Each and every one of these parcels that are tax exempt follow a an application process and an approval process to become exempt. So the law is clearly written who is entitled to be exempt and who isn't. So each year, anyone who's on this list, with the exception of mostly the bottom, because the top, the US government and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the city of Fitchburg, they don't apply for exemption, they're exempted, it's coded into law. But under other Chapter 5 exemptions, they have to apply. And so we get a bunch of applications every year and go through them and qualify anyone who, based on the qualifications, we either qualify them or disqualify them. So we don't have any control over how many are exempt. It's whoever comes and meets the qualifications will be exempt from taxes. So is that a lot? I would say that, if each of these paid taxes, we'd be in a much better position financially, yes. But the process becomes, we can't tax them because they're exempt, so then how do you tax? You try to encourage them maybe to pay a payment in lieu of tax, but that becomes a whole process where you have to sort of, convince them that they should give us money in lieu of taxes.
Right, I would hate to have to go through all the work of inventorying all the vacant property, which we have, that falls under commercial tax base, only then to be scooped up by businesses that are nonprofit or that are tax exempt. I
Right,
mean,
so
that's
there's-
almost 30% of our tax base is non-taxable. That
Right,
seems
there's
a
no
lot.
mechanism to bar them from entering our town, that I know of. So it becomes, what is the business? Is an allowable use in the city? The answer is yes. They put that piece of property to that use, and if they qualify for an exemption, they're exempt. I don't know of any way to bar a nonprofit from coming to our city.
Right, and that's not what maybe I am asking that, but I mean, that almost 30% seems like a lot to me if we're looking overall at our tax base and we've got a third of it that is non-taxable to begin with. So now we're down to 60%, 65% of a tax base, and 70% of all that is already residential.
Yeah.
So,
I agree that number is high.
okay. Thank you.
So, I'll just add, I don't think any of us go in here to think about, how we're gonna increase, how we enjoy increasing, the burden or shifting, taxes to residents. And sure, we could do the short-term approach and, we could shift this dramatically and shift the weight back onto businesses. And, we could help ease the burden for about 2 years before reality comes crashing back down on us and residents yet again begin to shoulder the burden of the tax levy moving forward. I think this is, as it's been stated before, this is the long-term approach. And we're not going to see in 2 years dramatic differences, and we shouldn't. In fact, I'd be concerned if we're seeing dramatic shifts as we do this from year to year. I think we have to look at this in a 10-year period and say, is it working? Is it working over a 20-year? Ultimately, this isn't helping the resident in 2 years. I hope that as you look at the length of your mortgage, that's how you look at it, as the length of being a homeowner in the city, of how do we help you in the long term? How do we prevent you from shouldering 80% or 90% of the burden of the taxes, or even 75%? Yeah, that's the long-term approach of building a stronger commercial and industrial sector throughout the city. We can't control all of that through here, and we would be incredibly mistaken if we thought just shifting this would be that one silver bullet that's going to bring about economic prosperity. But it's probably the single strongest tool that we have as a city council, as a body, to influence economic growth and to help create a more conducive environment to businesses. A lot of this responsibility, and it's not pointing the burden or shifting the focus is largely in the executive here of it's the day-to-day, what can we do to continue to create and partner with businesses? But this is something as a city council that we can do, and we can set the tone not only as we have over the past, several years, but moving forward of trying to create a more conducive business environment along with continued development, infrastructure improvement, implementation of broadband. Those are things that certainly impact business, and hopefully you can couple those all together, and that's when you have that ideal situation where business you see a continued and proportional increase in industrial and commercial growth. So I think we have to take a look at this in the long haul, and you can't be short-sighted in looking at this because we saw where we were over the previous decades, and we can continue to shift that burden onto businesses, but at some point it becomes counterproductive. So that said, with that said, Councilor Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You at the end.
Explaining this, or trying to explain this in percentages is extremely difficult. I think everybody wants to know, what's my tax bill going to be? How much is it going to go? According to the figures that Councilor Di Natale gave, it was $174 a year. That's about 50 cents a day that your tax would increase because we passed the budget. If we shifted to the shift to 100 from 116 down to 1, it would be 40 cents a day to the average taxpayer. I think everybody can understand 50 cents a day. When we pass the budget, that's how much it's going to go, roughly. You said 174 times 50 cents a day, 365 days, it would just about cover it. So everyone can understand what their bill is going to be if you just extrapolate and figure out what your assessment is. If we went to a shift of 1, it would be about 40 cents a day. Everyone can understand approximately 40 or 41 cents a day to the average tax bill. All these percentages, I think the only two people in the room that might be able to really understand them are the assessors. And it's extremely difficult for them to tell anybody else what it means. People want to know what their tax bill is going to be. They want to know how much the taxes are going up. As mentioned before, we're supposed to be trying to attract business, and for how many years have we been struggling to do it? We can't change the exits on Route 2. We're not going to increase those. We can't lower the electric bill, and that's always a political question. It's one of the questions asked of all the councilors at large running, and they always criticize Unitil. But Unitil sells gas also. And many times, gas is cheaper than our neighboring city. And I said, it's funny, nobody ever mentions that. You lump Unitil into one big thing, and it becomes one big problem. If the gas is less, and you pay more in heating costs, than you do electricity, why don't we advertise that our gas costs are less? I've never heard anybody do that. I haven't heard Unitil do it either. But we always crucify ourselves. I hear it in the rental market. I hear it in the real estate, residential market. I hear it in commercial and industrial. We're always crucified by Unitil. Why don't we advertise our good parts? If the gas prices are lower, let's advertise that our gas prices are lower than the neighbor. We always talk about Unitil because it's slumped. If it was two different companies and Unitil sold electric, you could criticize them all you want. But when they sell gas that's cheaper than our neighbor, no one ever talks about it. We just talk about the bad parts, not our good parts. So the one thing that the city council can do is shift the tax rate. We have a black mark on a city. Anyone that's coming in, they know the taxes for the residents are lower, but they know the taxes for the industry is higher. I had personal experience, there's a few people in the council now and in the past that have had it, and the mom and pops get killed. They're the ones that really, really hurt. All we think of is big manufacturing companies, big commercial places, and everybody with money. And let's hit them. As one councilor said, we can write it off. Well, you know, it's still an expense, and that's, to me, that's one of the reasons why people don't come to Fitchburg. In addition to the councilor said about land, we have to do more about that. But one thing that the council can't lower the rate, can't change the exits, we could advertise the gas, we should stop talking about, it's a political football, the electricity, inspired by the newspaper on a regular basis, but we can change the tax classification. So, as he said, 50 cents a day when we pass the budget. If we went to one, it would be about 40 cents a day for the average taxpayer. And the percentages are complicated. Pennies a day, I think people can understand. And I rounded them off, 50 and 40. You can go a little higher, a little lower, but I'm talking pennies. Thank you.
Mayor Di Natale?
Thank you, Council President. I addressed it to the council, but also the viewing public at home. I don't want to miss the opportunity. The assessor was asked by Councilor Caddy how we've gotten to this point, and we're not even close to being to the point that we'll be in the future. This is less than 2 years that this administration in this city hall has been in a responsible position to make an impact on economic development in the city. And I can't let this go without recognizing some of the people that take a team approach that we do. We put on a full court press in City Hall when it comes to businesses coming into the city of Fitchburg, prospective clients of ours. It's the Community Development Department. Tom Skorowski's right over here, a newly appointed executive director. Mary Jo Bohart does an outstanding job, works diligently in that direction. Liz Murphy, with her expertise in housing. Can't go without speaking about the city solicitor and the assistant city solicitor and the work that they do. The assessor, the finance team, including the auditor and the treasurer. It is a team effort. Make no mistake about it. And we are a very welcoming city hall. That was not the case. Always. These positive numbers don't even include the projects that I think the assessor mentioned that will come online next year. The solar projects, the soccer field, the medicinal marijuana facilities, the new strip mall, Water Street, Knockeg. Harper project, we haven't even talked about that. So these are things that are going to happen next year. The inventory that we talked about, Tom Skorowski's going to go into a little more detail when we go into city council. High-speed internet, council president mentioned that. It's ongoing as we speak. Airport Road, and you will be voting tonight for the project on Main Street. So these are the kinds of things that don't happen in a vacuum. It's because we've changed the culture in the city of Fitchburg. We've changed the culture in City Hall. Make no mistake about it. And it's only going to get better. Thank you.
So at this point, I want to provide an opportunity for any members of the public who wish to speak. City Assessor, Assistant City Assessor, thank you for being here this evening. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Mr. Nascimento? Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Council President. Good evening, members of the City Council, Mr. Mayor, city officials, and members of the general public that are looking on. For the record, my name is Roy Nascimento. I am President and CEO of the North Central Massachusetts Chamber of Commerce. We are a nonprofit business organization headquartered right here in Fitchburg. We have about 800 plus members, many of them right here in the city of Fitchburg, and many of them small and mid-sized businesses. And I want to thank, first of all of the the City Council for all the work that you've done in recent years in improving the city's business climate, both for existing businesses as well as those considering locating here in the city of Fitchburg. I'd also be remiss if I didn't extend a thanks to the mayor and his administration for the great work they've done. I do agree, I think there is a different climate here in the city in my time here, and clearly the city has made economic development a priority, and thank you for that. It is clear that Fitchburg is open for business and that development has gained a positive momentum which grows stronger every year. And there are a number of directions from which a city might approach economic development. Shifting property taxes towards a single rate is among the most effective methods long-term of illustrating that a community is truly committed to growing its commercial base. Tax rates are only one factor in an economy, so let's be clear, but it is a powerful one. And continuing to move towards a single tax rate would serve as a strong incentive for businesses to locate and expand in Fitchburg. It is also a step that lies within the council's power to take. There are a lot of things that are beyond the power of the city council, but this is something that you do have power over and that you can take steps to reduce and make Fitchburg more competitive. This benefits employers and residents alike as a reduced commercial tax burden attracts further investment and creates jobs. A vibrant local economy also raises property values, increasing borrowing power of local homeowners, and just all around helps the community. Though some would argue that business owners can afford a higher levy, these taxes can prove a serious hardship to the local storefronts, mom and pop businesses, and small businesses that make up so much of the business community here in Fitchburg and are so important to our local economy. In an age when international competition between manufacturers and corporations and businesses is increasingly fierce, it can also place an additional burden in front of entrepreneurs and other businesses who might otherwise be attracted to Fitchburg and to North Central Massachusetts. Last year, this body recognized these facts and voted to narrow the gap between residential and commercial rates. We would encourage you to continue that trend tonight and voice your ongoing support of Fitchburg's business community. We look forward to working with the city as a partner in growth. I want to thank you again for your leadership and for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak at this time? Mr. Zarella, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Anthony Zarella, and I'll be very brief. I just want to second that support for moving at a measured rate towards a single-tier property tax. I agree, it's not something we should do all at once, but it's something we need to do. I agree with Councillor Donnelly that the pinch looked at in actual dollars will be comparatively small year over year for the homeowners. And I'm a homeowner myself, so it's my tax bill I'm talking about too. But it's small to the homeowners. It's a large factor to the businesses. If I were starting a business and I could pay more in Fitchburg or less just across the line on the other end of Miriam Ave in Leominster, then it wouldn't, I mean, for me, I'd probably stay in Fitchburg, but that's because I want to support Fitchburg. We can't expect every business to be thinking of what's best for Fitchburg. They've got to think about what's best for their business. So I do support moving another step closer to a single-tiered system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Mr. Skrowski, good evening.
Tom Skrowski, the Community Development Department. I know the mayor mentioned I was going to speak later in council, but I'm so excited about this, I figured I'd just knock it out of the way now. So I'm not going to belabor the point. I think we've all sort of discussed the virtues of the single tax rate.
You know, I think if you take a look, and I encourage anyone in the public to take a look at the over 2/3 of the
cities and towns in the Commonwealth that have a single tax rate, their rates are overall much lower than what we see on the residential side as well. And I think that's a fundamental thing that we have to understand. And at the Community Development Department, one of our core goals is to remove the burden of the residential tax base right now. 80% was too high, 77% is still too high, and we need to get lower than that. And we need to do that by increasing the commercial tax base, and we need to do that with specific strategies, of which this is one. And I think that's a really good point that you make, Councilor Di Natale, and I just wanted to address that off the bat, what we're doing at the Community Development Department to incent new investment above and beyond just changing the tax rate. So in recent months, we've been working with UMass Boston's Collins Center. A few of you here on the Economic Development Committee are part of that group that's building an economic development strategic plan for the city that's not just looking in isolation in the downtown or West Fitchburg or down by the airport, but looking at all of it together. How can we increase the commercial tax base? How can we increase the job force and the workforce in Fitchburg? So that's one key element. Looking at it as a whole, how can we create a plan together? And that's not just city officials, not just councilors, that's local businesses, local stakeholders, everyone engaged in a process. And that should be out in the late winter, and I'll make sure to present that to the council for discussion. And then there's a few other key elements as well. Talking particularly to your question, your petition about city-owned parcels. We actually received a competitive grant both from HUD and now from Mass Development for site readiness programs to look at particular sites that the city owns in Fitchburg and what we can do to get those sites ready for development. So one of the key ones is on Airport Road, and then the former Lagoon site as well in West Fitchburg. And we're going through the process of developing those final projects. One of them for the Lagoon site should be out in just a matter of weeks, if not maybe a month or two. And the Airport Road one will take a bit longer, but both of those are looking at some very large sites and what we can do to parcel them out and incent commercial and industrial development. And then I think there's also just another component of, you mentioned undevelopable land, but I think it's really critical for us to look at smart growth and the ways we can develop within our existing infrastructure. Just as a quick example, the Lagoon site that has a lot of potential, and it's a very large site for commercial and industrial growth. It also doesn't have the utilities that are currently needed to create that growth. It doesn't have the roads. It doesn't have a lot of the hookups that are needed. If we develop within our existing fabric, if we develop within our existing neighborhoods and within our existing downtown, we're leveraging existing investment that we already have. And that's why we worked with Smart Growth America. They came in and did a technical assistance program, talked with all of you guys at council, and we did a workshop the following day. They'll be coming out with a next steps memo. And I encourage you all to think about how we can also utilize smart growth, not just new growth, to improve the tax base, both on the residential side and the commercial side. So to your point, I plan on following through with everything that you had asked, and I think, Councilor Tran, you bring up a good point. We've got to be able to measure the progress here, and creating a baseline for where we're at right now in terms of job growth, in terms of tax base, so we can see the growth over time is critical. We can say that this will incent commercial and industrial development, but I think to show it will take time, but in order to do that, we need to create measurements and measure them over time, and I'm completely on board with you on that. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak at this time? All have been heard. I now declare the hearing closed. The matter is now before the council.
Move to set the rate at 112. Second.
I have a motion and second to set the shift rate at 112. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Tran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick comment. It's really disheartening to hear that people say an increase of 50 cent a day is nothing. That's 50 cent above and beyond what we have already increased in the budget. It's not a pinch to some people. Drive around the city and see how many homes are foreclosed and for sale. Tell those people who are on fixed income that 50 cents a day is nothing. It is a lot to those people. It may cost their homes. So when I hear that 50 cents a day is nothing, it's really to me, it shows a lack of compassion. Thank you.
I have a motion and second. Speaking to the motion, Counselor Joseph.
Again, I know that some people lose track of what reality is, but I know there's only a 5% unemployment rate, and things are, believe me, I know that things are getting better for the unemployed. There are less and less people unemployed. There's more and more employers looking for employees than there are the other way around. But I would say the average company is still, now that we are giving raises, okay, 5 years ago we were talking about no increases for anybody. Now we're talking about 3 to 5% increases for people that are making minimum wage to somewhat above minimum wage. So I think that, again, where we feel that we're not putting that much more burden on the homeowner, just think about the struggling homeowner that, again, we've raised their water bill, we've raised their tax bill, we've raised their, again, Unitil has raised their bill. Everybody's taking a slice of the pie, okay? So it's not so much about how much this slice impacts them and how much this is going to get them back in the future, but you got to look at today and what we're taking piece by piece from everybody that we are taking that 77% of our tax base from. Some people can afford it, some people can't. So why do we have to make a drastic difference of 4% as opposed to 2%? So I guess I'm not in support of the 112. I was still hoping we would stay at 116, which would give us the same dollar value that we've been shifting for the last few years. But I just don't understand why we need to continue to get to that number faster than we have been. We've been doing 2% a year. Why do we have to increase it to 4% in 1 year? Think of your constituents.
To Counselor Tran and Counselor Joseph's point, I don't minimize the impact of any increase on our homeowners. In fact, I don't do this, and I'm not about to cast my vote in favor of this because I'm forgetting or neglecting homeowners. I'm doing this because I'm trying to think about what allows them to have a sustainable investment in their home, what allows them to be able to afford this, not just today. Yes, that's a factor, but we need to think about next year. We need to think about a decade from now. We need to think about 30 years from now. I look at it, partially from my own perspective. I just purchased a home, 2 years ago. I've got 28 years left of my mortgage. I plan to be in the city for at least another 28 years, but probably the rest of my life with my family. And I have to think about, what does this do to homeowners in the long term? What does this do to be able to, ease the burden on homeowners, in the long term, so that, we can have, affordable neighborhoods with affordable residential neighborhoods, while also having, complete streets and smart growth throughout our city, and having, neighborhoods and a downtown that people want to live, work, and invest in. We can't do one at the expense of the other. We have to look at this holistically. We have to look at what our community, is going to be. And I think we have to work towards that. So I don't do this to spite our residents. I do this thinking about them truly in the long term and how we can help them in the long term. Councilor Di Natale.
So if there is anybody in this room that has a voting interest in the budget, if they are so concerned about the well-being of the ratepayers and their pocketbooks, then they wouldn't have voted for the budget. Because the budget is what determined the tax increase. I will repeat again, ladies and gentlemen, your taxes went up on July 1st by a majority vote of the city council. So any city councilor who talks about compassion and we don't care about the homeowner, ask them why they voted for the budget. Because that's where the taxes were raised. And I'll be honest, I don't blame some of them for voting for it, because as I said earlier, they have no choice. When you have an unfunded liability that's going to reach $30 million in 15 years in 1 year, where are you going to get the money to pay for that? Don't blame me. Blame people 50, 60 years ago who said, you know what, we'll punt this issue for 30 more years and let future generations deal with it. Well, that chicken is coming home to roost quite quick. But I just wanted to point that out. If there's an issue about the compassion for the homeowners, don't vote for the budget. I didn't vote for the budget for a whole host of reasons, and I'm not patting myself on the back for it. When we talk about compassion, again, I want to highlight, taxes were raised $170 on July 1st because of what the revenues budget that was submitted. What we do tonight, if it passes at 112, the difference in a quarter is $11.10 more, $3.70 a month. So if we do nothing versus do the 112, the impact is $11 for the quarter, $3.70 a month. That's all we're doing with the 112 shift. What we own is the $3.70 a month, which is why we highlight it as a pittance when you compare it to what the bill was already increased by on July 1st that a majority of the council sanctioned. So all I'm advocating for is a shift of $3.70 for long-term future benefit, and no one is more compassionate or understanding of resident plight in the city than I am, because I'm the only one talking about the real problems coming down the pike that's gonna really cream people in the wallet. Sorry, I'll keep banging down that doomsday scenario, because it's coming, unless the state buys us a lifeline. So, $3.70. $3.70, not $170. That was done by a majority of the council on July 1st. Where was the compassion then, when the vote was taken? Thank you.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's roll call.
I apologize. This is a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
President Kushmerek,
Yay?
Counselor Bean,
Nay.
Counselor Boishman,
Yes.
Counselor Beazall,
Yeah.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Di Natale.
Yes.
Counselor Donley,
Yes.
Counselor Green,
Yes.
Counselor Joseph,
No.
Counselor Caddy,
Yes.
Counselor Tran.
No.
8-3.
8-3, the motion carries.
Move to adjourn?
I have a motion and second to adjourn. Before we adjourn, I just want to take the opportunity to thank our Board of Assessors, Ken Wilson and Chris Pocket, for all of their efforts throughout the year and in compiling these numbers and figures. We vote through it in an hour and 15 minutes this evening, but I know it took countless weeks of agonizing over these numbers to put them before us. So thank you for your efforts, as well as to Tom Caputi, our retired former chief assessor. So thank you for your efforts on this as well. That said, I have a motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, councilors.
We gotta sign those.